Prime Cabinet Secretary, Your Excellency President Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, Prime Cabinet Secretary, Cabinet Secretaries that are here, governors, members of Parliament, local government leadership, business leaders, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is a true pleasure for me to be here today with you, and I want to thank Governor Barasa for inviting me. I was very determined to come here. Yesterday, when I was boarding my flight, they told me that I need a visa. And I said, you surely do not know that after President Ruto was elected, Kenya was the first country to announce that all Africans can arrive in Kenya visa-free. And so I am a beneficiary, Your Excellency President, of the dispensation that you introduced, which I believe will contribute to boosting intra-Africa trade. Governor, may I congratulate you for convening us here today, the investors, the policymakers, and of course, the business community, small, medium enterprises, who are here in their large numbers to explore trade and investment opportunities. Indeed, as Prime Cabinet Secretary said, we must not cry ourselves out of poverty. May I add that we must trade ourselves out of poverty. And that is what the African Continental Free Trade Area is about. I stand here before you freshly re-elected to the position of Secretary General, and I want to thank His Excellency President Ruto, Cabinet Secretary Miano, and the government and the people of Kenya for supporting my re-election to this position. Last week on Friday, we had a detailed discussion with Afreximbank about the efforts that we can undertake at sub-national level to make sure that all of the aspirations that we've heard this morning, not only from the leaders who spoke, but also from the business community that spoke, that those aspirations become a reality through trade finance. All of the tools that enable trade in Africa are at local level or regional level or county level. The special economic zones that power industrialization in Africa are at county level. The agro-processing manufacturing capacity that takes place and powers industrialization, job creation, and innovation in Africa is at county level or regional level. And therefore, it is incumbent upon us to ensure that we provide the necessary tools to enable our subnationals to be globally competitive and, of course, to be competitive in Africa. The African Continental Free Trade Area presents an opportunity, a market of 3.4 trillion United States dollars, combined GDP and consumer spending, business spending and consumer spending rather, which is projected by the year 2035 to be a combined GDP of 16.2 trillion United States dollars, positioning the African continent to be at that time the 8th largest economy in the world by the year 2035. But of course, our continent cannot eat potential. We cannot be a continent of potential forever. We have to realize and see this potential become a reality. As far back as May 1963, our founding mothers and fathers, when they convened in the great city of Addis Ababa to establish the Organization of African Unity, not only was their objective to push back colonialists, to free the continent of Africa, but it was also to integrate Africa's economy, to create a single market, to create jobs for young Africans, to create competitiveness, and to position our continent as one of the leading investment destinations in the world. That was over 60 years ago when that vision was set out. I'm very happy today that under the wisdom of our leaders, the Assembly of Heads of States and Government of the African Union, today we have taken concrete steps towards making that particular vision a reality. The AfCFTA has been ratified as we speak by 47 countries on the African continent. It is rapidly transitioning, as Cabinet Secretary Miano was saying, from negotiations to implementation. And with the vision and leadership of our heads of states, we are determined that over the next 4 years, we will accelerate implementation, particularly in the sectors that have been mentioned today. We have identified agriculture and agro-processing, transport and logistics, pharmaceuticals, as well as the automotive sector as key drivers of Africa's economy. And we have partnered and are collaborating with the World Economic Forum in identification of investment opportunities across these sectors. And according to our studies, these 4 sectors constitute up to $130 billion market for investment in Africa. The private sector is critical for us to realize the objectives that all of us want to see of a more competitive Africa that trades with herself. We must, as Prime Cabinet Secretary has said, we must stop crying and do more. We must trade more. I want to mention an example of what is achievable. In the area of agriculture, the African continent is a net food importer. We import over $50 billion annually worth of food from across the world. Rice, barley, wheat, grains, and yet all of these products exist here on our continent. And I will give you an example. Ukraine-Russia context causes inflationary pressures on the African continent, pushing millions and millions of Africans back into poverty because of the price of food. And yet the African continent does have the grains that are required for us as Africans to feed ourselves and to ensure food security in Africa. So as a matter of an example, we're working with the government of Zimbabwe, which has over 100,000 metric tons of grains in excess per year. Post-harvest wastage that could be an exportable commodity to not only the region of SADC, but to the rest of the continent. This is an example of the critical tool that the AfCFTA brings to us to enable us as Africans to have the self-sufficiency that we require. And so in a few years' time, with implementation of the AfCFTA in the area of agriculture, we expect and envisage that Africa must be exporting food to other parts of the world after having fed herself and after having ensured food security in Africa. So the trade rules that the ministers of trade are considering will liberalize intra-Africa trade in food, particularly in basic agricultural commodities products, to ensure that Africa is able to feed herself and to have the food security that is required. Here in Kenya, in October 2022, I was fortunate enough to be part of the team that accompanied the President, His Excellency the President, when we flagged off a container or containers of tea value-added production that was being exported under the AfCFTA to other parts of the African continent. This was not only a demonstration of the important imperative of inclusiveness of trade, but it was also a demonstration of the fact that Africans, when we have the determination and the political will, we do have the capacity to lift ourselves up by our bootstraps. It was a very important occasion because what it demonstrated, and I kept saying this throughout the world, is that a trade agreement, which is the AfCFTA, has clearly demonstrated that there is inclusivity of benefits in trade, smallholder farmers in Kenya, smallholder tea farmers in Kenya, some of them unbeknownst to them, driving Africa's trade through exports of their tea to other parts of the continent. A final example as I conclude, Your Excellency, in the area of pharmaceuticals. The African continent in 2019, before the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, imported $19 billion worth of pharmaceutical products. These pharmaceutical products can be manufactured here on the African continent using our own resources where we deploy tools for value-added production. And so I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to share with you the vast market that is the AfCFTA and how at county level we can collaborate and work together to create opportunities for our people. I want to thank you very much for your attention. Asanteni sana.
Thank you, Mukele Mene. Your Excellency, distinguished participants, and the host, Governor, let me also thank you so much for putting this investment conference together. When Ambassador Meg Whitman was talking, one of the things that she brought out was the need to have a very robust engagement globally and internationally. Some people have been asking, why does the President of Kenya make trips outside? But unless you are not listening, you can now see that the trips that the President has been making are targeted to win markets, to draw capital, to woo investors so that they can come to Kenya. They can come to Kakamega, they can come to Busia, they can come to Vihiga and all other places. And it is a question of building the blocks systematically. And in that regard, it is now my honor to ask you to all be upstanding so that we can invite His Excellency the President, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, to address the gathering. Chapa makofi kidogo. Asante sana. Your Excellency, you're most welcome to address us.